Welcome back to yet another episode of The Learning Lever. Today we're joined by a co-founder of Rise and a former BSA expert of multiple teams, primarily the 49ers, of course, Steve Chan. Steve,
Hello,
I'd say
everyone.
welcome to being here because it's a podcast, but we talk every day and work and all that. So let's start with welcome to the podcast officially.
It's great to be here. Looking forward to this.
So, Steve, for those who don't know you, and most in the industry do compared to me, let's talk a little bit about, give us the short history of your going into the world of sports and out and back in, or how that might look. Give us a little background for everyone who doesn't know you already.
Sure. So I run operations here at Rise Sports Collective, but in my prior professional lives, mainly run analytics teams. And I like to qualify my professional history as my time before sports and my time within sports. Before sports, I built data analytics teams, I built data warehouses, and I did it for Silicon Valley companies. I had the great fortune in 2014 when the Niners opened up Levi Stadium to join them and build out their customer segmentation database strategy. That was the beginning of what we now call business strategy and analytics at the 49ers. It's very common now that professional sports teams have a BSA type organization. But in 2014, it feels like a lifetime ago, it wasn't very common. Maybe there's one or two people that did that function. Now there are departments and full-on thriving teams that have these kind of things. So my time at sports has been really, really interesting. We built many, many cool things at the 49ers. But yeah, that's my background in a nutshell.
So let's start there. One of the things that's interesting I found is those that go into sports and then progress, and those that come to sports from the outside, having a skill set, having a separate kind of profile or resume, if you will. What's the advantage of coming from outside of sports with some skills already versus coming up through the ranks, which is a little bit more traditional, to say the least?
Fairly traditional from that sense. So it's really broken down to two different things, right? The people that are start in sports and come from the ground up they mainly come from, let's say, fresh out of school or very few years within the professional industry. So there's a lot of things that you have to learn about being a basic professional in a corporate environment. And sports teams are going away from being just a mom and pop run organizations to full blown enterprise organizations with full-blown departments and things like that. And so there's a lot of things that you have to do to learn about the basics of how to represent yourself in a corporate setting. Whereas someone who has experience in another industry, like myself, I had almost 10 years of building analytics teams and analytics things. Coming in with that perspective to a sports team is a little bit different. You don't have to have the professional polish, let's say. You don't have to build that out because you already have that. But the skills that you've built outside of the sports industry and bringing them in is, think of it as a chance to supercharge the organization you're joining. It's not like teams don't have the capability to build this in-house, but taking best practices, whether it's strategy and analytics, whether it's marketing, whether it's sales, bringing expertise from outside the industry to within the sports industry brings a whole influx of fresh ideas, fresh ways to approach problems, and we're seeing it more and more often as these teams build out and try and hire more and more.
Yeah, it seems to be the trend, right? I mean, at the end of the day, the skills that are needed are more advanced, and the innovation that's in other industries can be welcomed in. So it seems like that's a bit of a growing piece compared to what it might have been maybe 5-10 years ago.
Yeah. And I would qualify that leagues, teams, and sports industry in general, they are still implementing best practices that have been established in, let's say, Silicon Valley companies over the last 10 years or so. So that was that's the other piece, which is like all the best practices when it comes to e-commerce or just cold called sales or CRM. All these things that are being worked on outside of the sports industry, the best practices being brought into the sports industry is kind of where we're at right now.
I think that makes a lot of sense in what we've seen, what we've been teaching, what our courses are all about. All right, so 49ers, your first big team. You've been there. You were there a long time. Lots of interesting projects. You were there as the state. It was a new stadium. It was a new over the first few years. What are some of the key pieces of that that you latch onto, or that really kind of distinguish that time that you spent? Like,
Sure.
is it the first BSA team? Is it something specific you did within the team? Give us a little bit of insight about that.
Sure. And I would like to paint the picture of like how sports teams are operated before, let's say, a whole concentrated effort to be analytical about it. Let's be real and let's be like clear. Sports teams are quite capable of selling tickets and selling out their stadiums without a very in-depth database, analytical, customer segmentation strategy. Teams have been profitable for a long time before, and they could be without any of this analytics focus. But the smart teams that are really trying to maximize the opportunity in front of them, and it's not just maximizing revenue, but it's the fan experience, it's the stadium, it's the community outreach. All these things can be supercharged, if you will. The opportunity to do more because you're analytical about it just opens up so many more opportunities for revenue growth, for outreach, for community, for bettering the fan experience, and all those things. So let's be very clear, teams don't need to do it, but the teams that are leaning into this are doing the right things in terms of building better customer segmentation, being able to identify who the ticket purchasers are, and they also build a full cycle of better customer service, better customer support, hand-holding throughout the whole purchasing process. It's clear that teams that are way into kind of an analytical and strategic approach to this do much better in terms of ticket sales and revenue charge and contribution to kind of their league revenue model. Business strategy analytics at sports teams touch many verticals and departments within the organizations. At the Niners, we've always perceived ourselves as the internal consulting department that will consult with marketing, with sales, with member services, stadium operations, ticket operations, the whole shebang in terms of even the game day entertainment, that kind of stuff. So we came in with the idea that we couldn't. Let's take, for example, the VP of sales when I first got to the Niners. He had been there for 20 years. He knew exactly what to do, how to sell tickets. He didn't really need our help. But we slowly morphed his approach of, let's say, one email blast for everyone to targeted communication and messages to specific people, seeing how they respond, being able to experiment and to just incrementally improve our messaging and the uptake and the conversion rates. We slowly whittle away any doubt that a programmatic, a analytical way to approach this problem of selling tickets was the way to go. Because we could measure our effort in terms of finding these people, what we spend to find them, and the ROI in terms of their ticket sales there. We could build that full circle loop of the ROI analysis. And that was leaps and bounds better than a very successful VP to that point just saying, let's go with this messaging because we know this will hit.
True. Well, it's interesting. You mentioned a couple words there like segmentation and testing and different response rates and things. You've done a bunch of courses for us on the specific skills, like whether that's the visualization of a venue or whether that's ticket analytics. You've done as many as anyone as a BSA person and as a Rise employee. You got picked on a lot for a lot of these good courses. You had the skills and you were here, so that's been good. And people can take those. That's wonderful. Let me ask you about my favorite element that you always draw out in some way in every one of those courses. It's the skill set, which is very important, and you always focus on that. But also, it's the having, I don't want to say opinion, but direction or action or the story. Like there's always that, the job to hand it off. And even in your story, you're talking about the VP of sales, help that person understand how to use it. What part of the job or what percent of the job being successful relies on taking the analytic work you do and getting it in the right hands in the right way? if for lack of a better word, maybe.
My response to that, that's the most important thing. We weren't, I mean, back in 2014, the early days, we weren't building complex, data science models and the things that teams are doing now. But, whether you have the most simplistic model built in Excel or a very deep, self-fulfilling data science model, like helping you aggregate like who the best buyers are, if you cannot make it simple for the stakeholders to use and embrace and for them to adopt in their own thinking, any supercharged analytics in the hands of someone that doesn't understand it or embrace it is a lot of wasted time.
Yeah.
Your stakeholders have to know what you're providing, they have to understand it, and they also have to embrace it. And it's really important that you could come with you could provide the most perfect model that returns 99% accuracy, tell you exactly what to do and this and that. But if your stakeholder, let's say on the sales side or membership or marketing side, doesn't understand it, doesn't use it, or doesn't believe it, then your help is not going anywhere. So they have to be bought in, they have to understand it, and they have to want to implement it as well.
It's in a lot of roles, but it's probably very, very pronounced in a particular way when you're taking the data to someone that may or may not even want it in some cases. Less so now, for sure, but definitely an area. Okay, I got another one for you. I'm curious. Like you took me to the first conference I went to SBJ Drive a few years ago, I think, as our first sports conference. We've been on, I can't even imagine how many different stakeholder calls, sales calls, operating expert calls. One of the things that you're most known for that people ask you about is the huddle. What is I kind of know now because I've actually been in the huddle and I've heard of the story, but share with our listeners, like, one, what is the huddle? And then a little bit about like how you're so well known for that. Again, you get asked about it quite a bit. And so give us a little bit of idea of what's the huddle and then your history and interaction with what that is.
Sure. Would love to. The Executive Huddle, powered by SAP.
Yes. Executive Huddle, sorry.
Executive Huddle. Think of it as a real-time analytics physical space, an analytics war room that is up and running during major events at Levi Stadium. So, they're hosting the Monday Night Football tonight. And so in that room will be a few analytically minded people monitoring a real-time data feed of some really cool information coming in. So we have, in the Exec Huddle has, the main data source is all the ticketing data. So how many tickets were sold is kind of like the basics there. But what's really cool is we have all sorts of entrance scans. So we know when you scan your parking ticket, and we know when you scan your stadium ticket to enter the stadium itself. And so we know when you parked your car, we know when you entered the stadium. After you come in the stadium, the Exec Huddle also has other data feeds that track what is being purchased at every food and beverage stand in the stadium, as well as all the retail stores. So tying all the user information together, when someone arrives, how long they're tailgating, what gate they come in, if they bought any food or beverage or beers or whatever, and if they bought like a jersey or hats or those type of things. And then we also have real-time satisfaction scores. It's via a company called Happy or Not, but these buttons throughout the stadium. You hit the frowny face if you're not happy, you hit the happy face if you are, and we collect that data in real time as well. Now, mind you, none of this data is looked at the individual level. So like we could tie it down to when Ryan Richardson comes into the stadium, but we don't. We look at things in major aggregates. But because we know scan counts, we know satisfaction through Happy or Not, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit that we can do to help the fan experience. We know when crowds are forming. We know when people are not happy with the, we're out of ketchup at one of the concession stands, or one of the bathrooms is in particularly like traumatic shape. These things would take in a world before the Exec Huddle or something like the Exec Huddle where we can aggregate these data sources in real time.
Sure.
We would literally have to wait till the next day when our data sources would, in normal fashion, like today's today's data warehouse is crunching yesterday's data, we would literally have to wait for all these data flows to come through for us to know that there was even a problem, or wait for our post-event survey sent to the customer. They have to fill it out and send it back to us to know that there was an issue.
No chance to fix. No
chance
to
to fix, right? So there's no chance. I mean, like, if you think about a football stadium, there's maybe 10 home games where you can really enact and affect the game day experience. So if there's a little window for you on the day, on the event day itself, to see an issue, resolve an issue, and better a customer's experience, then that is worth its weight in gold in terms of being able to do that.
Without a now, talk about where this is centered then as well. Only because that gets a lot of attention as well. Is this in a desk in the basement? Is this? And again, I'll actually share. Like, when I did a lot of stuff with Silicon Valley-based companies, they had the network operation centers, and they were, glass-walled rooms, and they were somewhere in the first floor usually, and they were pretty much maybe cordoned off a little bit, and it was a common thing because you had to monitor web traffic and security feeds, and so I've seen a network operating center, but this is not that, and yet it is. So what's a little different about the one you built, or that you helped build? I know you had some help.
If you think of a war room or a typical kind of network ops place, you think of a low lit room, dark in the basement, all the nerds kind of just like shoved in the corner and not allowed to see anyone. The exec huddle that we built at Levi Stadium was front and center in one of the suites. It was on the press floor, so we had a high vantage point of the stadium itself, but it had a clear view of the field itself. And then the back of the suite, instead of the normal refrigerator and table for food, we ripped all of that out. We have a large touchscreen in the back so that we could literally touch and point and help us run analysis on all these dashboards running up. We had a quad screen TV displaying things so that when people came in, they could see what we're looking at on the touchscreen mirrored on this giant screen. And then we had 3 TVs at the top that had dedicated dashboards to ticketing, Happy or Not, and the retail and F&B. All those were permanently displayed dashboards up there. So it was the first time you step in there, it's just a little bit overwhelming with all the screens of information. But as you sit there and take a second to take it all in, you can begin to understand, like, hey, I want to focus on what's going on with gate scans. If you have any issues there, you physically walk over to the screen, and you can just kind of like immerse yourselves in that data. So it was a suite next to kind of other suites where people are celebrating and watching the game. But this was a centralized hub of all the data, all the customer satisfaction that we had at the stadium that we were compelling, aggregating in real time.
I'll say this. I was lucky enough to get up there and check it out. And I will say that it really has this unique quality of, you feel like you're in the heartbeat of the organization, not just the game, because you can hear the game, you can see the game, you can hear the crowd, and you see the numbers, and you can see when there's something super compelling, certain things go down. When there's a lull or a break, certain things go up. And it's a desirable space to be in on top of all of that. So it was an Apple Watch of the stadiums. Like, I got all my little heartbeat images right at my fingertips. It was very interesting. And it's becoming more standard, this concept of real-time analytics and real-time response, and being able to share that with more than just one person at a desk or one dashboard. It's with an audience. You could have discussions in front of multiple screens too about hypothesizing why something was happening. So very cool space. And again, I can see why people bring it up, but I like to share, like, it's one of those that definitely was innovative, still is at this point. It's not everywhere yet by any stretch of the imagination. It was a very cool thing to do. I mean, part of it was just like how I referred to earlier, where sports teams don't really need an analytics team to do their customer segmentation, if you will. But those that do, tend to do better. The Levi Stadium doesn't need the real-time analytics war room to identify issues and solve customer problems. Like, those happen on the ground floor as it is, if the exec huddle didn't exist. But the fact that we do have it, we don't have to wait for surveys. All the things that are solved during the day
during the game day itself, like we are keeping track of them now. And it's just another arrow in your quiver for you to be able to solve problems during a very, very busy event.
Yeah. All right, we're switching gears here a little bit. A little bit less of your past. Let's talk about learning, right? This is a Learning Lever podcast. One of the things I like to ask people, there's learning that happens when you're in school, grade school, middle school, high school. There's college, there's graduate programs. All of that very formalized and is very interesting story, and I love talking about it. But one of the things I like to try and get out of people is, can you think of a learning experience that was part of a job or part of a training program, something that was formalized that left a positive impact? Like not, oh, I had to go through this horrible compliance thing, which we've all done, or I've had to hit the video and then go to another tab and ignore it. But what is something that maybe left a positive influence that was learning on the job or for a job post formal school?
It is the immediate story that comes to mind is the first job I got after graduating school. I worked for it was called Diamond Technology Partners. They are a technical consulting company. I think they're bought by KPMG or whatever, but like it was modeled after those big box strategic consulting companies, but my role and the team that I joined was very technical in that sense. What was really interesting, what really sticks out, and is why I'm bringing this up, is before we actually picked up our first consulting client, we spent 3 weeks in Chicago. All the new hires of that cohort, we spent 3 weeks in Chicago. They they had us in the nicest hotels, and we had conferences in the Ritz-Carlton. Like, it was nice. It's because they took their training very, very seriously. And so this training was all the things of like, what is the expectation of yourself when you are a consultant? What do you say? How do you look? Like, how should you dress? How should you show up? When do you fly out? All these things that you don't learn in school that you kind of need to be a polished consultant. Like, they take those 3 weeks to really instill in you what it takes to be a good consultant under Diamond Technology Partners at the time.
Sure.
And so it wasn't just the basics of like how to dress yourself and those kind of things, but it's like the expectations of like, how do you run a meeting? What do your deliverables look like? What is your job as an analyst? What is your job as a manager? What is your job as the team representative lead? Expectation setting, how to solve problems, how to build a model, how to build a presentation. All these things were like institutionalized into my personal skill set. And I draw on those lessons still today. And that was like 20 something years ago. If for me, that corporate training really set me off and really set the beginning of my career at a very high trajectory, because I didn't have to go figure out those things by myself, or I didn't have to talk to my one peer who kind of knew a little bit. Like, we got handed the whole playbook of how to be a polished professional. And that still sticks with me today as, the fundamental parts of like why training at your job is so important. It's part of the reason why I wanted to like be part of Rise at the beginning, is because I go back to the beginning of my career. I don't think I'm here without that training.
Look, I think a lot of us can reference that session, that 2-week onboarding, that offsite. I think there's a fair amount of that was common in certain industries for a long time, and I think it's still there, but less common. A lot more ad hoc, a lot more peer driven, and a lot more asynchronous, like what we're doing. How would you describe to someone that's looking at the learning we deploy to teams and leagues, what are we doing that's tapping into that, knowing that we can't put them up at the Ritz-Carlton, which, by the way, great idea. Love that. Always good. And there was a certain amount of like, there's still things we're doing and can do. What pieces do you see that can still be a part of quality training, even when you don't have that wonderful offsite element that we sometimes just don't have the same option for anymore, quite frankly? What do you think we're doing there? Or what do you like about what you're doing when you're building your courses for that purpose?
What I like about the courses is that they're very specific to a specific skill set with the right context of why you need it and how to use it. And so one of the classes that we have best packaged up together encompasses not only the technical skills of how to do something, but what to do with it. And so I have courses of learning SQL. I have courses how to use Tableau, but the examples of how to use, let's say, building a visualization in your stadium is like a cool thing you can do, but without the knowledge of like how it's useful, to which team it could be useful to, having that context provided with our training, I think is a very critical piece.
Yeah. Well, I'm a sucker for skills, knowledge, and context, and I think that's always a key piece for us. All right. We're getting towards the end here, Steve, and I didn't give you a heads up on this. So normally I like to surprise people, but okay, Steve. So we've got one final kind of creative way to talk about learning. Start thinking about your favorite TV shows or movies. Okay, can you think of a TV show or movie where you can see learning playing a role, whether that be with the characters, whether it be something you've learned about, whether it was a life lesson for you, but something where learning stood out as an element in the movie or show that you could share with us? Because movies are fun and TV shows are fun.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know how kosher this is going to be, and I'm going to kind of run with it because I'm kind of like thinking off the top of my head. But like my favorite TV series as of late has been Breaking Bad. I think that's the most wonderful, interesting TV show in terms of sit back and just kind of absorb what's going on, or get really into it and figure out how this like applies to your own life, that kind of stuff. When you asked about the learning and kind of the application of things, like what I immediately go to is Walter White with his incredible knowledge of how to make a pure product from a chemistry perspective.
He has product. I got it. We're with you.
I mean, he's quite literally.
Yes,
We're talking about fiction story, but like Walter White is like a literal school teacher who has the perfect way to build a perfect product in this. And then you have Jesse, who is not from from the education side of things, kind of street smart, but in my mind now, as we're talking about it, represents the contextual application of that perfect skills, right?
I like where you're going.
Only until you marry like the perfect skill set with the perfect context and knowledge of how to apply it, did their business kind of take off and like take over the world or take over Albuquerque or whatever have you, right? But it goes back to like, you can have all the knowledge in the world, but unless you know the exact way to apply it, like it just doesn't hit. It doesn't work. It just doesn't make the thing go.
I love it.
Also, if you have all the street smarts in the world and the context of how to play the game, but don't have the skills to kind of bring a good product forward, you're just going to be Jesse, who's just like slumming it around and not taking things to the next level. So, not that I'm trying to model our corporate training with what they're selling and Breaking Bad.
We will not forward this to HR.
but there is that dichotomy of working together, and you have to bring both sides to it.
For sure.
You have to bring the street smarts, you have to bring the actual knowledge, and combined together, you have a perfect way forward in terms of growing a business. Let's use it.
Well, it's a great example. I mean, heck, every single episode or season they have to learn to solve another problem too. Like they're constantly learning because they're trying to do stuff that's illegal or that they can't easily do. So I love that. And I do think the context of what they each bring is a very good example of you can only do so much if you don't expand, get knowledge, and hopefully that's what we're pushing on a more practical and a more responsible side of things with the learning we have. All right,
definitely
Steve,
more legal than what they're doing over there. So yeah.
Okay, well, listen, everyone, thank you again for joining the Learning Lever. We really appreciate you kind of joining. We hope you picked up something today, whether that be something about BSA, whether it's a story of the Huddle Room, build your local Huddle Room, or just another chance to go revisit Breaking Bad. We hope this brought you some entertainment and a little bit of knowledge. Thank you again for joining. We'll see you on the next episode. Have a wonderful day. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Thank you for listening to the Learning Lever.